I came home on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that feels unreal after years of noise, commands, and dust. My duffel bag sat heavy on my shoulder, still smelling like oil and canvas, and the tires of my truck crunched slowly down the gravel road I'd driven 1,000 times in my head while overseas. This place, my place, was supposed to be the one constant. The small workshop out back was the first thing I ever built with my own hands after enlistment, a squat steel-frame structure where I fixed engines, welded gates, and cleared my head when the world felt loud. I hadn't seen it in almost 2 years, but I knew exactly how it should look. Except it wasn't there. At first, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The concrete pad was still there, cracked in the same places, weeds pushing up along the edges. But the workshop itself, walls, roof, doors, everything was gone. Not damaged. Not partially torn down.
Gone.
Cleaned out like it had never existed. I pulled the truck over and just sat there, engine idling, staring. My heart started thudding hard, the way it used to right before something went sideways on patrol. I got out and walked the pad slowly, boots scraping over loose gravel and bits of splintered wood. There were tire tracks, heavy equipment tracks, pressed into the dirt. Someone hadn't just trespassed. They'd brought machinery. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No emails. No notices taped to my gate. Nothing. I walked back toward the house, my chest tight, and that's when I noticed the new sign staked near the driveway. HOA common area. Unauthorized structures removed.
HOA.
Of course. This development had formed while I was deployed. I remembered getting a couple of generic letters years ago, full of legal language and community standards, which I'd ignored because my land was deeded separately, outside their boundary. I'd had a lawyer confirm it before I ever shipped out. My workshop had permits older than the HOA itself. I stood there, staring at the sign, feeling that cold, focused anger settle in. Not the explosive kind, the kind that sharpens everything. Someone had made a decision while I was gone. Someone had assumed I wouldn't push back. Maybe they thought soldier overseas meant easy target. I walked the perimeter, taking photos of everything, the pad, the tracks, the sign, the broken lock on my side gate. That lock had been military-grade steel. Someone had cut through it anyway. The realization hit me in waves, not just that my workshop was gone, but that strangers had walked my land, moved freely through my space, and erased years of work without so much as a phone call. About 20 minutes later, a golf cart rolled up from the neighboring subdivision. A woman in sunglasses and a crisp polo shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand, smiling like she was greeting a lost tourist. "You must be back," she said brightly. "I'm with the HOA. We handled that eyesore for you." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, then at the empty slab behind me. "You demolished my workshop," I said finally. She nodded, still smiling. It was an unapproved structure on HOA land. We sent notices. "You demolished private property," I replied, slow and even. "On land you don't own." Her smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "Our legal team confirmed." "Your legal team?" I cut in, made a very expensive mistake. She scoffed lightly, scribbling something on her clipboard. "If you have concerns, you can file a complaint. But it's already done." I watched her drive off, dust trailing behind the cart, and something became very clear in that moment. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be a reckoning. I didn't sleep much that night. Jet lag and anger make a vicious combination, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty concrete pad. By morning, I was up before sunrise, coffee untouched on the counter, laptop open, paperwork spread across the table like a field map. If the HOA thought this was going to end with a complaint form, they had badly misjudged me. The first thing I did was pull the property file I'd kept digitized for years. Deed, boundary survey, tax records, building permits for the workshop, all stamped, signed, and dated long before the HOA had even filed its articles of incorporation. The land line was clear. Painfully clear. My workshop sat nearly 80 feet inside my boundary. Not shared. Not conditional.
Mine.
Next, I called my attorney. He picked up on the second ring, probably recognizing the tone in my voice before I said a word. They tore it down, I told him. There was a pause. They did what? I emailed him the photos while we were still on the call. Heavy equipment tracks. Cut lock. HOA signage. The empty slab. When he finally spoke again, his voice had lost its casual edge. Don't touch anything, he said. Don't remove debris. Don't talk to them again. This is bad. For them. That was the first time I felt something shift. The anger was still there, but now it had direction. By mid-morning, my lawyer had looped in a civil litigation specialist and a property rights expert. Within hours, I had a checklist. File a police report for trespass and destruction of property, send a cease and desist letter, and request all HOA records related to my parcel. They weren't just in the wrong, they'd created a paper trail proving it. I drove down to the county office next. The clerk pulled the original plats, spreading them across the counter. She traced the boundary with her finger, then looked up at me, eyebrows raised. That workshop was never even close to HOA land, she said. Not even arguable. Good. Asked for certified copies of everything. On the way home, I stopped by the site again. An excavator sat parked just beyond my fence line, HOA logo still on the side. I took more photos. Wide shots. Close-ups. Serial numbers. If this went to court, and now I knew it would, I wanted every angle. That afternoon, the first letter went out. Not a complaint. Not a request. A formal notice of liability. It outlined unauthorized entry, illegal demolition, conversion of materials, and damages. Replacement cost alone ran into six figures, not counting lost equipment, lost use, and emotional distress. And that was before punitive damages. The HOA president called me less than an hour after it was delivered. There's been a misunderstanding, he said quickly, voice tight. We're sure this can be resolved internally. You had no authority to enter my land, I replied. You destroyed permitted structures. This is no longer internal. He tried a different tone. Look, you were deployed. Things move fast. Sometimes exceptions. You don't get exceptions, I said. You get consequences. He went quiet. That evening, a neighbor stopped by. Older guy, lived here forever. He looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the empty pad. They've been telling people your place was abandoned, he said. Said they were cleaning up. That confirmed what I'd suspected. They didn't make a mistake. They made a calculation. And now they were about to learn how bad that calculation was. 2 days later, the HOA made its first real move, and it told me everything I needed to know. A crew showed up early in the morning with a flatbed truck and started loading what remained of my workshop materials: steel beams, corrugated panels, even the old tool cabinet I'd bolted to the slab years ago. They were trying to erase evidence. I walked out onto the driveway and told them to stop. One of the workers hesitated, phone already in hand. 5 minutes later, the same woman from before arrived, clipboard replaced with a tight smile and a rehearsed tone. We're reclaiming materials from an unauthorized demolition, she said. It's part of mitigation. You're stealing, I replied, holding up my phone, camera rolling. On camera. On private land. She didn't like that. None of them did. She snapped at the crew to load faster. So I called the sheriff. When the deputies arrived, I handed them my deed, the survey, and the county-certified plats. They compared the boundary markers, walked the fence line, and then turned to the HOA rep. This property is not within your jurisdiction, one deputy said flatly. You need to leave. Now. Her face went red. We were told. Who told you doesn't matter, he cut in. You're trespassing. The crew unloaded everything they'd touched and drove off in silence. The excavator followed, tracks grinding against the pavement like a retreat. That afternoon, the HOA's lawyer sent an email. It was carefully worded, full of regrets and miscommunications, but it didn't offer restitution. Just an invitation to discuss resolution. My lawyer replied with an itemized damages list and a deadline. Then came the inspections. A structural engineer assessed the slab and confirmed the demolition had compromised it. A contractor estimated rebuild costs, higher than the original due to updated codes. An appraiser documented the loss of property value and use. Each report stacked another zero onto the claim. Word spread fast. Neighbors started coming by, some apologetic, some angry on my behalf. More than one told me the HOA had been overreaching for years, fining people, seizing property, threatening liens. My case was just the first time they'd gone after someone who could fight back. 3 days before the deadline, the HOA board requested an emergency meeting. I attended with my legal team. They sat stiffly at a long table, binders open, faces pale. The president tried to speak, but my attorney took over immediately, laying out the evidence piece by piece. Unauthorized entry. Demolition without notice. False claims of jurisdiction. Attempted removal of materials after notice of liability. When he finished, the room was silent. Finally, one board member whispered, "How bad is this?" My lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. "If this goes to court, you're looking at full reconstruction, compensation for lost use, legal fees, and potential punitive damages. And that's assuming no criminal charges stick." The president swallowed hard. What does he want? I leaned forward for the first time. "I want my workshop rebuilt," I said. "Exactly as it was, or better. I want compensation for every tool you destroyed or removed. And I want a written admission that you had no authority over my land. Publicly recorded." They stared at me like I'd asked for the impossible. I knew then they understood. They just didn't like it. And they were about to try one last thing. Their last move came quietly, the way bad ideas often do. 2 nights after the meeting, I woke up to headlights sweeping across my bedroom wall. I looked out the window and saw an HOA pickup idling near the fence line, hazard lights blinking. A man hopped out, clipboard in hand, and started taking photos of my property like he was conducting an inspection. That was the moment I realized they weren't backing down. They were doubling down. I stepped outside and asked him what he thought he was doing. "Documenting ongoing violations," he said, not even looking at me. "Unauthorized structures. Storage. Land use." I laughed, short, humorless. "You're trespassing again." He shrugged. "HOA authority." I called the sheriff again. This time, the response was faster. Same deputy as before. He didn't even need to look at the paperwork. "You were told to stay off this land," he said to the HOA rep. "This is your final warning." The deputy took statements, logged the incident, and made a note about continued harassment. That note mattered. A lot. The next morning, my attorney filed for an injunction. Not just to stop the HOA from entering my property, but to prohibit any contact, enforcement action, or communication related to my land. The judge granted it within hours. That injunction cracked the whole thing open. Emails surfaced. Internal HOA messages obtained through discovery. Messages where board members joked about my deployment, called my workshop an easy cleanup, and bragged about asserting control before he gets back. One line stuck with me. "He's military. He won't want to fight." They couldn't have been more wrong. With the injunction in place, contractors moved freely, my contractors. They surveyed, planned, and documented. Every receipt, every hour of labor went into the damages file. Meanwhile, the HOA's insurance provider got involved, and their tone changed overnight. Suddenly, there were apologies, offers, good faith gestures. Too late. At the next board meeting, open to the community this time, the HOA's lawyer stood up and announced they were suspending all enforcement actions pending legal review. Neighbors murmured. A few clapped. Others looked stunned. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because behind the scenes, negotiations had turned brutal. Their insurer wanted this gone. Fast. The numbers kept climbing, and the risk of punitive damages loomed larger with every new email uncovered. 3 weeks after I got home, the HOA formally conceded jurisdiction. They recorded a statement with the county acknowledging my land was never part of their authority. That document mattered more than any apology. But the reckoning wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The settlement meeting lasted less than an hour. That alone told me everything. The HOA's attorney slid a thick folder across the table, hands tight around his pen. Inside was a full reconstruction agreement, a new workshop, larger footprint, Upgraded materials, reinforced slab, modern electrical, better than what they destroyed. They agreed to replace every tool documented as lost or damaged, compensate me for lost use during deployment and return, cover all legal fees, and issue a formal written apology entered into the HOA's permanent records. Then came the number. It was big. Big enough that no one at the table tried to justify it. Big enough that the HOA president wouldn't meet my eyes. But there was one last clause I'd insisted on, and my lawyer waited until the end to bring it up. Permanent exclusion. The HOA would record a binding covenant stating my land, and any future structures on it, were forever outside their jurisdiction. No inspections, no fines, no mistakes. If they violated it, damages would trigger automatically. The room went silent. Finally, the insurer's representative nodded. Agreed. That was it.
Done.
Construction started the following week. I watched the new workshop rise from the slab piece by piece, steel beams bolted down, walls lifted, roof sealed tight. Every sound of welding and hammering felt like something being put back where it belonged. When it was finished, it stood stronger, cleaner, and more deliberate than the original. But the real aftermath hit the HOA harder than any check they wrote. News spread.
Fast.
Neighbors filed records requests. Fines were challenged. Liens dissolved under scrutiny. 2 board members resigned within a month. The president stepped down shortly after. The HOA's insurance premium skyrocketed, and their legal budget tripled overnight. All because they thought no one was watching. One evening, as I locked up the new workshop, the same older neighbor stopped by again. He looked at the building, then shook his head slowly. They really thought they could just take it, he said. Yeah, I replied. They did. He smiled a little sadly. Not anymore. That was the part that stayed with me. This wasn't just about my workshop. It was about lines, real ones, legal ones, and the ones people assume don't matter until someone enforces them. I'd left to serve, trusting my home would be there when I returned. Instead, someone decided my absence was permission. They were wrong. Now, every time I walk into that workshop, I see more than tools and steel. I see proof. Proof that paperwork matters. That quiet preparation beats loud authority. And that some mistakes don't just cost money. They dismantle power. They tore down my workshop while I was gone. When I came back, I dismantled their illusion of control.